And so I plan on by the 26th, we'll have the last two in place. We'll have a full slate for everybody. So when you do consent, that would include the two additional names that were added, one on Building Board of Appeals, and then the confirmation of the one on Zoning Board of Adjustment. So council wish to pull any items on consent this evening? If not, entertain a motion to approve.
Move consent.
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Aye.
Martin?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Edie Hanson?
Aye.
Thank you. All right, we'll open up public forum, and I have one card of someone who wishes to address council, Mary Richards, and I would ask you would please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. Thank you. Introduce yourself and your address.
Good evening, Mary Richards, 720 Kellogg, apartment 201, Ames, Iowa. First of all, I want to thank you very much for appropriating the money to do a greenhouse gas emission survey for our community. This is an extremely important first step toward reducing our carbon footprint, and we encourage you, and when I say we, I'm speaking for the climate action team as well. We encourage you to continue this momentum by making sure that this survey is undertaken as soon as possible. The second item that I have is, although the city of Ames, with its municipally owned utility, will not be directly affected by the net metering bills that are currently being proposed in the Iowa legislature, you do have some reason to be concerned about those bills, which were essentially written by one of the monopoly investor-owned utilities, MidAmerican, and that's House Study Bill 185 and Senate Study Bill 1201. MidAmerican says that when they have to pay a premium to some customers, costs are shifted to other consumers, but that is inaccurate. That's not how the grid works. The fee to use and maintain the grid has already been paid by the customer, and any burden on the grid by returning electricity to it would be negligible. For this reason, putting electricity on the grid isn't like running a car on the road. The latter wears out the infrastructure. Electricity doesn't do that. The fact that privately generated electricity is going on an existing grid is not at all like paying for the lineman to come out and repair your electric lines during an ice storm. It just doesn't work that way. The fee structure that is being proposed by the bills would severely reduce the advantage of installing solar in the first place by private persons and businesses, and it would leave the field completely open to the monopoly utility. For private solar production doesn't create additional costs for MidAmerican. It prevents MidAmerican's future profits. And because their rates are regulated, the way they make more money is to produce more electricity and serve more customers. They don't want the competition that's represented by non-utility solar production. And of course, as you're well aware, competition is a venerated part of our economic system. We should not be eliminating it. Now, the City of Ames should be asking why their utilities association, the Iowa Municipal Utilities Association, is supporting this bill, because they get no benefit from it at all. And the association's support is creating negative feelings with organizations that in other circumstances support municipal utilities. So I would urge you all to inquire and to register your concern about this. Thank you.
Would you, Mary, I'm aware of the bill, the number of the bill is which?
I've got copies of that for everybody.
What number is that again? House Study Bill? Is that 185?
185.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Anybody else wish to address council? Seeing none, we'll close public forum. We'll move on to item number 11, which is a hearing. And Dwayne, do you or Nancy have anything that you want to offer before we go into open the hearing?
I'll just, for the benefit of people that may be fairly new to this, just kind of where we are in the process. First of all, on the bonds, we'll be asking you to approve a resolution entering the loan agreement. You're not actually approving the bonds at this point, and also a pre-levy amount. So once you approve bonds and issue them, you're approving the levy for that bond issue until it's paid off. In this case, you haven't levied any taxes yet. You're going to do that in a few minutes. So you have to do what's called a pre-levy resolution, and that's included in that first action that you'll do here right now. And once that's done, we can move on to the budget, and we've already published that in the newspaper as required, and we're ready to proceed with the budget that you approved at our last meeting.
Okay. Any questions for Dwayne or Nancy? All right, I declare the hearing on the 2019 General Obligation Corporate Purpose Loan Agreement to be open. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address council on this topic? Seeing none, close the hearing and entertain a motion on resolution.
So moved.
Go ahead, Gloria.
I was just going to say, read it aloud. I move that we enter into a loan agreement in a principal amount not to exceed $11,880,000 and authorize the debt.
Second.
All right, move seconded. Roll call.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Item 12, any comments before we go into this?
No, this is amendments to the 1819 budget,
Okay.
the ones we went through during the whole process.
Okay. All right, declare the hearing on amendments to fiscal year 2018-19 budget to be open. Is there anyone in the audience that wants to address council on this particular topic? Seeing none, close the hearing, entertain a motion on resolution.
I move we amend the budget for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2019, as we discussed.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Roll call.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Item 13, anything on this, comments on the budget?
No, this is the hearing on the budget. I think we may have mentioned before, but once we publish, if there is any public input and you decide to take action, the only action you can take is to reduce the budget at this point. You can't increase it.
All right, I declare the hearing on adoption of fiscal year 2020 budget to be open. Anyone want to address council on this topic? Seeing none, declare the hearing closed and entertain a motion on resolution.
I would move to approve the fiscal year 2019-2020 budget.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Okay. Item 14, hearing on rezoning of 114 South Dakota Avenue from CCR to CCR with revised master plan. Kelly?
Good evening, City Council. Tonight you have a proposal to amend the CCR residential zoning district on this property that was approved at the master plan to approve an amended master plan. The property was rezoned from PRD, which is a residential district, in 2017 with a limited number of commercial uses and a small number of apartments allowed in a mixed-use format on this property under the CCR zoning district. The applicant has proposed to allow for a gasoline service station and a convenience store as part of this. That use category does not fit into the commercial trade group as defined in our zoning ordinance, which necessitated the proposed amendment. The change would be to allow for miscellaneous use, which is a very broad category, to allow for the service station. Staff has recommended, if you do choose to go forward, that you limit the use to vehicle service facilities, which includes gas stations, and not the broader range of miscellaneous uses. What is proposed is to develop this 4.68 acre site with commercial uses. It could be any of the uses that are permitted on the master plan, which would include commercial trade uses, commercial office uses, the allowance for the apartments, but it also prohibits short-term lodging. That was a use that the neighboring development to the north had requested as part of the original approval, and the applicant is proposing to continue that with this proposal. Part of the consideration of this request is that it's a rezoning because it is amending what was approved originally through an ordinance and a zoning agreement for the master plan. Alternative one, which is the recommended approval of the project, does acknowledge that a signed zoning agreement, again, acknowledgement for the property or about the restrictions of use on the property, would be required prior to third reading on the ordinance itself. This is our standard practice for rezoning when a master plan is included, is to allow for it to be received by the city prior to your final approval of the ordinance. During the review of this, the Planning and Zoning Commission did consider this 2 weeks ago. They were deadlocked at a 3-3 vote, and they ultimately forwarded no recommendation to the council. This was due to the fact they had an empty seat and did not have a way to break the tie. So they made a motion, which was a little unusual in that there was no way to break the tie, to say that they were deadlocked and recommended that you continue without a recommendation from them on the project. The commission discussed a number of issues that really revolved around traffic circulation. As we noted in the council action form, the site would have some access controls depending on how it's proposed to be developed. In and out access or full movement access across the roadways would require specific placement of driveways to the traffic engineer's satisfaction during site plan review. What we noted in the report is as the site currently, and you can see the former church on the property and how its driveways are outlined, those would not be adequate for a commercial development on the property if they were looking for full access onto the site. And we've noted that if that was to occur, a new driveway would be needed on South Dakota at the very north property line. And also Mortensen Road, that an alignment with Coconino Road would be necessary if you wanted a full access driveway off of Mortensen. If there was two-way access, if there was right in, right out access, the traffic engineer would recommend some immediate improvements to prohibit full turning movements. So after staff reviewed the use and has looked at how it is compatible with the surroundings and looked at some of the access issues that go into developing the site, we are recommending approval that the site could be developed consistent with the city's specifications and also could be compatible as a commercial site with the addition of the new use.
Questions for Kelly?
Kelly, my concern with this is the trail that is on the south side of that property is heavily utilized.
Mhm.
And I just want to make sure that we take into account the heavy trail use there. On the west side, to a degree as well, but that south side, huge number of users, runners, walkers, bikers on that trail. So whatever we do, I hate seeing more curb cuts on such a major arterial bike area, but have to access the property somehow. But I want somehow the safety of the users of that to be considered.
No, that's a good point. I fielded an email on this too. Someone who's concerned about, the fact that there's a bike trail north-south and then one east-west there too. But Kelly pointed out, which I thought was interesting, that the drive-through restaurant use would have already been permitted, the way the property is currently, and that the traffic difference between the two wasn't that great. And I was like, oh, well, in that case, they would have already had a high traffic use permitted. So but I agree that that's something we should think about. But I think it seems controlled in this circumstance.
Other questions for staff?
Yeah, I have a question. You mentioned the zoning agreement that would be undertaken before it was completed. Is it your intention, if we move forward with the vehicle services uses, would it be your intention to further restrict that to gas stations and car washes maybe, or would you include the full scope of vehicle service uses listed?
Our recommendation is alternative one, which is to use the word vehicle service facility, which is a defined term, and it's a category in Article 5 of the zoning ordinance. So whatever uses fit that terminology of the zoning ordinance, staff is supporting. So it's a limited set of uses, and what we listed in the alternative one as an informational in parentheses, where we said car wash, gasoline service station, minor auto repair, that was to be informational to you. It's not those three uses. Those are the three most typical uses under that label. That's why we included that for your information.
Okay, I understand. And so that would apply to the zoning agreement too that comes also later.
So the zoning agreement is really, the computer's kind of new, a little bit different process here. So what I have here on the overhead is the exhibit, which is the legal description of the property, a plat to show you where it is. This is the most rudimentary version of a master plan that we allow in the zoning ordinance. You have discretion to require more detail with a master plan than this. This is the format that was approved last time. And in the top right, you see the notes about restriction of uses. The zoning agreement is really a cover form that acknowledges the resolution and the ordinance that tie this all together so it gets recorded against a property. It won't have any more restrictions on the property or than what you see on this diagram unless you add something else tonight.
Okay. So I'm just thinking, what's the spectrum of possibilities here? If something goes wrong, I mean, we've spoken about convenience store, gas station. I know this was the topic at planning and zoning, but the proposal actually before us is to allow vehicle services use, period. And it's not restricted to any location on the lot for any type of vehicle services. It could be all car wash. It could be, I mean, I don't think the owner probably wants to make it all car washes, but that would be allowed if we adopted this language. Is that true?
Yep. So that's a category within miscellaneous uses. So that's what would be permitted. And it could be more than one if that's what you're suggesting, that you had a gas station or a car wash or a different commercial building on the site. A gas station won't take up all of this property. It will only be a portion of it.
Kelly, you received feedback from the property owner to the north. The middle school is just a bit further on to the east. Any input from the middle school?
No, we didn't have any specific outreach to them either. So I would be surprised to have heard any feedback from them on the
A
proposal.
lot of school kids are going to be passing this. Okay.
Other questions for staff? All right, seeing none, I will declare the hearing on rezoning of 1114 South Dakota Avenue from community commercial residential to community commercial residential with revised master plan to be open. And if everyone who wishes to speak will limit their comments to 3 minutes. And Luke, go ahead and start.
Good evening, City Council and Mayor. Thanks for the opportunity to have this before you. Last Tuesday,
I know we know you, but for the record, would you please introduce yourself and your address?
Luke Jensen, 2519 Chamberlain,
Thank you,
with
Luke.
the Jensen Group. Tonight's amendment and rezoning amendment unlocks and paves the way for a substantial investment on that corner. I think it provides certainty to something in the existing neighborhood that provides value to our stakeholders in that area. The applicant, or we are the applicant, but our user is also here to describe in more detail of what types of services they're expecting to use with that. I think a topic that we have been committed to throughout this is working with our neighborhood. To the north, we've met with the neighbors. We've stayed committed to the restrictions of 48 one or two bedroom units over commercial, no short-term lodging, and enhanced screening along that north boundary line. They're also here tonight to weigh in to give council input. The question about the whole site. So the way that our agreement is with the user is there wouldn't be able to be additional convenience stores to the east. They would have a right to their 1.5 acres plus or minus on the west side. And what that does for the balance of the site is it unlocks the potential and provides a level of certainty for other businesses, other service providers to come in and populate the east side or east third, 2/3 of our site, knowing that the convenience store is on the west third. So I think this is a win-win for our community. I think it's a win for the neighborhood. It certainly provides a fair amount of predictability and certainty. The issues with curb cuts and traffic controls can and will be addressed through the site planning. Happy to answer any questions. I know there's a few other people here to share.
I'll allow questions for Luke since he's representing the applicant.
I do have a question. Would it work for you if the zoning amendment, instead of saying vehicle service uses, said gas stations and car washes?
It probably would. I don't know if that's a possible. I don't know if we even have that in our zoning code
So I did want to clarify. I understand what you're saying now. So when you read alternative one, it is saying vehicle service stations, which is a subcategory of a vehicle service facility. So it does not allow major auto repair. You can't have an auto body shop. You can't have the larger kind of auto repair shops under that label. So it would be restricted to car wash, vehicle emission test sites, gas stations, minor auto repair and sales, or a quick lubrication service. Those are the only 5 uses that fit that label. So I hope that's a more accurate answer to what you were asking a few minutes ago.
Thank you. Yeah, that does help. Could
Yeah,
you-
and at the time of our meeting with staff, we had started down a miscellaneous use and through further detail, limiting it to vehicle services, and that's compatible with what we want to do there.
How does staff define minor auto repair?
I think we have vehicle repair facility as another group. So if you are one of those, you could not be minor auto repair. So I would presume, without it being spelled out in great detail here, is that idea that you were not a principal use of that. Like, think of the Sinclair station on the corner of Lincoln Way and Duff, where they used to have or do have 1 or 2 bays for auto repair and a gas station. That used to be a model that existed. You don't really see that now with the C-Store model, but that wasn't presumed at that point in time. If you were only auto repair, you're going to fit into the vehicle repair facility. Then the oil change could be a standalone use.
Thank you. Other questions for Luke, since you represent the applicant tonight?
Luke, I appreciate the fact that this is a very desirable corner, given its location in the community. You've heard my concern about the curb cuts. I'm very concerned. We have lots of Iowa State students, lots of middle school students using that, particularly the Mortensen Trail, but also the South Dakota Trail every single day. Can you give me some sense of what can be done to help minimizing the curb cuts and addressing issues of safety? We have to look out for those people as well.
Yeah, and I appreciate that and do share the same sentiment. Somebody mentioned that with any development, there will be some change or some access change. And so what we want to do is work alongside the city staff and the traffic engineer to create the most desirable way to access that site. The app or the users here, they're going to describe a few of their site-specific details, as such as right in, right out, full access, things like that. I think we're open to other ideas that we can come up with to create more awareness to make that as safe as it possibly can be. So having access, being able to get there, regardless of vehicle service use or commercial use or residential use, something's going to happen there. And we're committed to lining up the road with Coconino and working through the Mortensen or the South Dakota curb cut.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? All right, thanks, Luke. Hello.
Good evening. My name is Casey Bonger. I am Director of Real Estate at Hy-Vee, and appreciate you taking a look at this evening. So just wanted to give you a little bit of background on what we're proposing for this site. It is still under contract, and so there are still several details that we have to work through, obviously, with city staff on the site plan. But as Luke had mentioned, we are proposing a convenience store. It is our new fast and fresh concept. We just opened this concept in Altoona, and that was opened, I think, last month. And then in December, we opened one in Davenport as well. It is a larger convenience store, 6,500 square feet or 8,000 square feet. It provides more grocery options. You're just quick, milk, packaged meat, dairy, or I already said dairy, but general grocery store items. In addition to that, it also offers home meal replacement options as well that you can take home and cook there, or there's options that you can have made in front of you. We have a new department called Mia Pizza, and that is a potential option that may be in this building as well. So it's more than just convenience store. It provides options for people on the way home. It also will potentially have a coffee drive-through as well to provide customers in the area with that option. So we are excited about this new concept and want to bring it to Ames and invest in the Ames community, and think it'll provide obviously a positive economic impact to Ames as well. And I think as Luke had mentioned, and Kelly as well, as part of the site plan approval process, we do work with city staff and the traffic engineer on those concerns with traffic and curb cuts. So that is something that would be reviewed.
Any questions? I do have one. That is, you're purchasing the west 1.5 acres, is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
Will you use the whole 1.5 acres, or you'll reserve the north portion as an outlot that could be developed by somebody else?
No, it would be the entire west portion. That size of a convenience store really takes up that whole area.
Yeah, the reason for the question is that if you had enough space there, you could actually subdivide it. It'd be interesting to find out what you're planning on doing with that other space, on the north, but you're going to use the whole 1.5 acres.
Yes, yep, it would be.
Any questions for her? Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Anybody else want to address council under public hearing on this topic? Seeing none? Yep. Sorry, I'm a little, keep the thing going, so.
My name is Heather Simmons, and I live in 908 South Dakota. So I'm on the board for the HOA for the condominiums at Willow Creek Estate, and we do support what they're wanting to put there. For us in the neighborhood, we would like to see a coffee store and a fast and fresh. And for some of the options that came up before the planning and zoning last time, our biggest thing was not wanting to have a hotel. Of all the options that came up, this is one of the best ones. We know it's going to be developed into something, and this is something we believe would be good for our neighborhood. Anyone have any questions?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else? And I'll give you a minute to indicate. All right. Before I close the hearing, Kelly, I have one question. That is, I think this concept sounds very interesting, but council is approving this on the basis that anything could go there that fits within this criteria. So if Hy-Vee backs out and it goes to Smith Brothers, gas station, that would still be allowed. So we're not just approving it because of this particular use. So there's no misunderstanding that.
Right. Our recommendation is not based on Hy-Vee being a presence on the property.
Okay. All right. I will close public hearing. Council, discussion.
Do you want a motion?
I would be happy to entertain a motion.
So I would move alternative 1 to approve on first reading the ordinance to amend the CCR zoning district with master plan, allowing the listed uses.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Moved and seconded. Discussion.
So Kelly, you've had a chance to hear, I think maybe there are other people on the council that share my concern with respect to safety. We get to have someone who speaks on behalf of the HOA, but there's no association for the walkers and cyclists along there. Could you just take a second to speak to the way in which safety becomes a factor in the way in which the staff develops this plan?
So we did speak with the traffic engineer from the Public Works Department about this in great length before finishing the council action form last week. So we start out with a fairly decent condition, and then we have 8-foot shared youth paths here. And it's a large intersection, but we're not really talking about the intersection crossing at this point. We're really talking about how driveways will interrupt people on a sidewalk or a shared use path. The main issue that the traffic engineer is going to be very interested is very good, clear sight distance. So that and in this case, what's maybe a little different than a sidewalk is you're going to have bicyclists mixed in. So you have different speeds of traveler on this path than just a sidewalk with a slower moving pedestrian. So the sight distance will be very important to make sure that, which we would look at any time, but we're probably a little bit heightened level of consideration about the viewpoints entering and exiting the site. So that's his primary interest for this, is the visibility of those people. Minimizing the width of the driveways, so they're smaller. You have to go slower to cross them. There are detectable warning requirements for people before you cross the driveway. So you'll have that little bumps at the driveway. So you will get that reinforcement that you're changing atmosphere or environments here from the sidewalk to crossing a driveway. Those are the basic things that will go into the design. What we don't have is a standard that says at what level of sidewalk activity do you restrict curb cuts to the least amount possible. That's not something that's part of the evaluation. It's really making what is provided as safe as possible.
There, just as a point of reference, this path gets a lot of users. One of the users, there are a lot of cyclists who are going at a pretty good clip along here. It's a very desirable area for cyclists, and so they're moving at a little faster clip. They're not necessarily on the road. They're on that bike path. So I have to trust the safety engineers to work hard at this. So I appreciate your explaining that. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions, discussion?
I'd just like to reflect on the Planning and Zoning Commission discussion of this. It's unusual for there to be a split that's then brought to us, but I think that they really put their hearts and minds into analyzing the situation, and so we're going to vote ourselves too. But I just want to acknowledge the hard work that they did on this. I think we're benefiting from it as well. I think they identified some concerns, but also some reasons to move forward. So thank you.
Good.
And just clarifying, the ordinance that we're voting on tonight, or they're voting on, has been amended to affect exactly what we're talking about here. This first passage.
It's first passage.
Yep.
Alternative one. Yep.
Good. All right. Roll call.
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Very good. Thank you very much. Thanks, Kelly.
Welcome.
All right. On to item 15, transitional letter of compliance. And while Sarah's coming up, as council's been made aware, there's a lot of activity down at the State House. And one of them may be affecting the topics that affect or interface with this transitional letter of compliance. So Sarah and I talked about this afternoon, and I asked her to just kind of share, if the rental cap goes away as being proposed, and it's moving through I think, Mark, you said it came out of committee yesterday. Is that
Came out of
right?
Committee yesterday. It has the new bill numbers. So the bill number that's mentioned in Sarah's has been updated. It's now Senate File 447, but it was voted out of committee by a large margin yesterday. I think 11-3. So
Is there a companion bill in the House?
there's not.
So anyway, I asked Sarah the reason I asked her to comment on it was that if this was directly related to the cap, does it make sense to table this and not talk about it tonight until we have some certainty in terms of where we're headed at the state legislature level? But Sarah had some very good points that some of it is not affected by the cap as well too. So I'll let her go through that, and then council, you can decide if you want to table it for a short period of time. That there are some, I will let Sarah comment on some of the applications she's seeing as well too, and explain a little bit why maybe there's some sense of time is of the essence on this topic. So Sarah?
So the transitional LOC changes that we made were made to the rental code, not in a section that directly related to the cap. So this applies citywide. That's something to consider. If somebody wants a transitional letter of compliance in Somerset right now, the same rules would apply to them as somebody wanting it on Storm Street, for example. So it's not directly related, but from what we've seen, maybe the information that SCAN has provided you with, some of the workarounds that people are trying to do would be a moot point if the cap goes away. So if the cap's not there, now they can just make it a rental. So the transitional is not an issue. We are seeing, we do have some people that have applied for transitional LOCs, purchased properties with the intention of getting a transitional LOC. knowing full well that they can have it registered for the 2 years and then on a year, off a year, on a year, off a year. I think one example was somebody purchasing it for their grandchildren, 7 years down the road or something. And they felt that it was still profitable for them to purchase it now, acquire the transitional LOC, rent it for a couple years, and then have it as a rental every other year, essentially. So that's one of the workarounds that SCAN is talking about. Also, Mark may be able to elaborate a little bit more on it, but there is the ability for somebody to purchase an LLC or sell it under a different name. So the way we wrote the ordinance was that a new owner would get 2 more consecutive years. So essentially, if they sell an LLC to themselves or sell it under a different name, I think that they would still get those 2 years, giving them 4 years. If they did it again, 6 years. So these are the concerns SCAN has presented. We have received several applications for transitional LOCs. Right now, we know that it's a 2-year letter of compliance. It's probably not a big deal. Of course, if the cap gets removed, it's really not a big deal. So it would just be for you to decide, are those important enough to worry about now and make changes to the ordinance, not knowing what the future of the cap might be?
What's the downside, Sarah, of just staying status quo for the time being?
We just may continue to get transitional letters of compliance that have intentions of working around these loopholes. So right now it won't change anything because they can get it anyway for a year or 2 years. So if in the meantime the legislation changes and we can't do this, then those people will probably come in and apply for a full letter of compliance instead of the transitional.
And timing wise, Mark, is the proposed bill subject to the funnel requirements?
It is, as I understand, the funnel deadline for bills being out of committee and the chamber that they originate in is this Friday, but it's come out of committee this week. So it means it's eligible for debate. So it's made the funnel cut off for now. We don't know if the House is going to take it up and pass it or not, but it's moving in the Senate for sure.
So when I read the bill, and maybe I read it wrong, because I'm not all that familiar with reading these bills, it looked to me like we could be considering this LOC, the broader LOC issue, as actually covered by this bill. We talk about the cap neighborhoods, but they don't mention caps at all. What they talk about in the bill is, well, actually they do say caps, but the bill prohibits a city from adopting or enforcing a regulation, restriction, or other ordinance related to residential property rental permit caps on single-family dwellings. So I take that to be even broader than just a cap neighborhood, but that limiting the number of LOCs in some way may be impacted by this. Is that perhaps an incorrect interpretation?
I think it could be. I want to say that I think this is a very poorly drafted piece of legislation. So they fixed it a little bit by taking they had this weird retroactive language in there that they pulled out, but it's not, they don't define rental cap in it, which is odd. And so what exactly it applies to, I think will be open to interpretation, but we'll have to look at it, if it passes and decide what it limits. But I think limiting the number of LOCs would probably be considered a rental cap under that.
Mm-hmm. So then that makes me wonder whether having staff do anything at this point would be kind of a waste of time when we're only really waiting for like a month. I think April 15th maybe is the full cutoff for everything.
Yeah, to a certain extent. I mean, if we all know, if we know what we want to do, if it'd be an easy decision and easy work by staff, we could just save ourselves work later on by doing it now, in terms of prohibiting people who are illegally renting from obtaining an LOC or something. If that's what we knew we wanted to do anyway, might as well do it now. But if it's only April, I agree that's not that bad. We could kick it down the road a little.
So Mark and Sarah, is there a downside then to postponing this for a month or a month and a half? What's the risks that you see?
I don't see any. If the law changes and it comes out that this is not, we can't do the cap, then it's moot point. If it doesn't change, then people are still locked in a 1-year letter of compliance that can be renewed for 2 years. So it doesn't change much at this point.
And it might affect your recommendation and what you put together as well too, based on what the final bill, how it reads as well too. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Okay, so is there interest to table this?
I move that we table this matter.
To a date certain, or just until there's clarity or action on the bill, or what would you suggest, Mark?
Yeah, I would table it until we know the outcome of the rental cap legislation in the legislature.
Do we need to have a specific date? I can't remember.
I know Diana's asked
No,
for
I
it.
don't
You don't?
know to table it.
All right. All right. To move to table this topic. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Move to second. Any discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Okay. Thank you. All right. Item 16, revisiting discussion on property sale hardship exemption request from Robert Howell for 107 South Riverside. Council, there was a memo in the packet, which was accessible to everyone who was of interest. Do you have any questions for Mark on this particular memo?
I do, Mark. So I want to be careful if there are things that we can do in our procedure that would make us less subject to a lawsuit as a result, please let us know that. So I don't know if it's better for us to let it, if it's going to be a split vote, is it better to leave it, or is it better for it to come back vote again and then have a split vote? Do you have an opinion on that?
I don't, in terms of our liability or, a lawsuit against us, I don't think it makes a difference. The vote that took place was a resolution, even though I had misidentified that at the last council meeting. And as long as we're sort of publicly making a statement that, the mayor's vote didn't count in that because it was a resolution, not a motion, then I think we're fine on where we're at, and we can defend that. I don't know that taking another vote does that. It's, adds anything to it.
I wanted to get that from you.
Yeah.
I'm fine.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? All right. So is there any interest by the prevailing party to have a motion to reconsider? And if not, we will move on. All right. We will move on. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
All right. Item 17, Homewood Golf Course Club Design. Keith.
Good evening, council. So, kind of went through the question whether or not with the clubhouse design, if we should pursue lead or not, looking for direction from city council. Throughout the design, we have been looking at energy efficient options and highlighted some of those things such as geothermal and some of the other high efficiency, the LED lighting and so on. What we did do, and it was highlighted in the council action form, that our consultant did take a look at 3 different scenarios, regarding the carbon footprint of this building, kind of a code-based building, which was 75 tons per year, and then the current design, which was 62 tons per year. And then if we would to either formally or informally pursue lead design standards, then it was another 5 tons per year could be a reduction. With that though, of the 5 tons, there were really 3 items which were highlighted, in there to really account for the 5-ton reduction. So, and that was only at a cost of $17,000. The lead certification, our consultant is saying best estimate could be anywhere from $200,000 to $400,000, to do that. And there wouldn't be any greater reduction in the carbon footprint. So, Parks and Recreation Commission at its meeting on January 29th did have this conversation, and some of their comments were listed in the council action form. And their recommendation, was to pursue the current design and institute as many energy efficient options that we can while still staying within the budget. So that is what the alternative staff's recommendation for tonight is. Alternative number 1, which is direct staff to continue with the current Homewood Clubhouse design, incorporate as many energy efficient items as the budget allows. And I would say that talking with our consultant, to institute these 3 additional items, he feels we would be able to stay within the budgeted dollar amount that's been allocated by council. So that's what staff's recommendation is.
Just to clarify, you'll see this facility is much more than just the golf course clubhouse. This will add another amenity to our park system. What is the capacity going to be for meetings? And
well, the community room would be about 80 people. And then if you opened up the door and used the concession area as well, you could have in the wintertime up to 105 or so people.
so right now we only use it during the club or the golf course season. This will be a year-round facility. They'll be used for many more events than just the users of the golf course. So great amenity to the park system. I believe people will really like this meeting room. There's a shortage of meeting rooms in this community. There probably always will be. So this is a great event center for us of a moderate size group.
So I completely agree with the recommendation from the commission, because I think the value in LEED is the guidance that is provided for achieving certain standards. The certification itself costs a lot of extra money, and I don't really see the value in that. But my question is, have previous councils somehow bound us to a policy that says we will pursue LEED certification?
No, I just want to get clarification for him, because in some cases we did. We've tried for it in the Cyride building. The water treatment plant, as you know, John, was given an incentive, and we may have some good news in a few weeks for that. Almost $6 million was tied to that. But I know sustainability is one of your priorities. I don't like to get caught in certifications because you let other people dictate certain levels that maybe it's not important to you. I'd rather accomplish what you want to accomplish. And it seems to me it's carbon footprint reduction. So if we can do it more economically, why not do that? So I'm just trying to test the waters. I know to some council members it's maybe important, it may not be. It's certainly harder in a smaller facility like this, but I think you'll find that you pay a lot for that certification, and maybe there's ways we can use our citizens' money to be just as effective for carbon reduction without getting close to the LEED certification. Just want to make sure I was on the right track and not find out later. So this is a good test for me in future buildings, actually, what your opinion is.
Other questions for Keith or Steve? Just one quick question. Is the consultant planning on putting in some alternates then? So in other words, for cost control measures, or is he very confident that all 3, or that he or she is very confident that all 3 can be put in and still comfortably be below the budget, so we're not caught in I have to go for a rebid?
I just talked to him again today, and he felt pretty confident that we'd be able to do that. Now, one of the things that we have discussed is doing some alternates for potentially some additional energy efficiency things that maybe we wouldn't be able to do, but we could do as an alternate if the bids come in favorable. We could add those items as well.
Okay. All right, I'll open up public comment on this topic. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address council on this particular item? Seeing none, we will close public comment and council.
I would direct staff to continue with the current Homewood Clubhouse design and incorporate as many energy efficient items as the budget allows.
Second.
Move to second. Any further discussion? All right. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Thank you, Keith.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to item 19, bicycle parking standards.
This item was referred by City Council as part of the work plan to receive information about bicycle parking standards for uses in the zoning ordinance. We prepared this over a year ago and gave you some information that in the bicycle parking standards category, there's really about 3 issues you want to think about. It's which uses do you want to apply it to? And then the type of bicycle parking in most instances is divided up into that short-term visitor kind of parking and more the long-term occupant of the building parking. And it's referred to as secured and unsecured parking. And when we say secured, it means that it's enclosed or within a building or has a locker or something that's more contained and safe than just a bicycle rack, which would be the more unsecured version of that. So if you choose to move ahead with any of the options in here, we would need to have some direction on the scope of the change. Are we looking at establishing new standards for a wide range of uses? Another option that's described is creating more of an incentive option, which would be a substitution, where you could add bicycle parking in place of vehicle parking in some instances. With your direction, then I can help guide you towards what the work plan environment is for this in terms of what the schedule could be to address it. It doesn't need to be ranked or prioritized against other items. In general, if you went with the incentive option, it doesn't mandate anything. It doesn't cost anybody anything unless they choose to take advantage of it. It would likely be a very easy insert to the zoning ordinance. It would not necessarily need to have a lot of participation and consultation with others. If we go the other direction and start to add to uses, both the visitor and the long-term occupant parking, that would be a more in-depth discussion with property owners because they would have to understand what would be expected of them, probably have to start to digest what that cost burden is or whether there's a trade-off that benefits them as an incentive to work with that as well. So that one would probably take more time and need to be.
Kelly, just to clarify, when you say the incentive option, you're talking about trade-offs, right? With automobile parking versus bicycle parking?
Correct. So that anybody can do bicycle parking now, right? That's not prohibited. There's just no encouragement of it. If you do it, you have to meet all of the vehicle parking standards, all of the landscape standards, all of those things, plus add bicycle parking. So in the incentive version, we would either allow you to have less parking to incent you to do that, or maybe replace parking for automobiles with just bicycle parking. You could look at that as 2 different options or 2 different ideas of doing the same thing.
And we talked about this earlier, and you mentioned with that incentivized option so that, say you'd have less automobile parking in exchange for a ratio of bike parking. You mentioned that's only easy in commercial and industrial uses, right? That residential would still take some time to think about because we don't want to underpark the residential multifamily.
Because of how our letter of compliance for rental certificates are tied to parking being provided consistent with the zoning ordinance, I'm a little leery of what exactly are we incenting with apartments? Are we incenting more units by building less parking, or are we actually incenting bicycle parking?
Right.
Then the other question is, do you expect that parking to be locked, the full enclosure type of parking inside of a building versus just racks that are outside? Because there's just different interplay there about what the expectations are.
So when you say that the incentivized option would be easy and something we could add fairly quickly without burdening staff, you mean just for the commercial industrial?
I mean for commercial industrial, yes.
Good. I just wanted to mention that too.
Do you have an opinion as to how likely commercial industrial interests would be to take advantage of this? In any way to predict that?
I don't think there is a way to predict it. I think I think on the smaller sites, you're competing for so much space to meet landscaping and parking standards that most people won't think about it. And they'll say that's too hard to solve for. So hopefully with the incentive, they're saying, oh, there's an easy way here. I carved out a 9x19 space for cars. I'm allowed to put bicycle parking there. Great. I didn't have to rethink my site. I can just do it. I think that's how we're trying to say that we're accepting of that being on the site. If we had, and I think in general we have low parking requirements, but I think if we're saying you can remove 2 parking spaces to add bicycle parking, there's not a significant impact to that. And we could look at whether you have at least a certain number of spaces on the site before you can take advantage of that also, if there really is a concern. But that's most likely what you're doing, is trying to allow someone to not have to rethink their site, just add bicycle parking, which would be a benefit to the public to have a way to visit a site and have a secure location to lock their bike.
Other questions for Kelly?
Do we even have any of these Class A or, inside long-term storage bicycle facilities in town that people are aware of?
Intermodal.
What did you say?
The intermodal, there's some racks under the roof, right? That would be.
They would have some of the a couple of the campus town redevelopment projects, the mixed use student projects. A couple of them have created bike locker rooms, so they're not necessarily stacks of lockers, but it's a secure room where they have hanging racks where they can get a lot of volume into those rooms, but it's not an individual locker per se. So there's a couple of those in those campus town areas, and maybe some office industrial users have some, but it's not common in this area to see it.
University used to have them at the dorms, but I think they got destroyed. So I don't think they have them anymore.
Any further questions?
I have a motion.
Okay,
No question.
Trey, open up public comment on this. Is there anyone in the audience that wants to address council on this topic? Seeing none. All right, Bronwyn.
Well, I would move that we direct staff to draft a proposal regarding the incentivized alternative for commercial and industrial uses. That's pretty much it.
Second.
All right. Moved to second. Discussion?
I have not had a single person approach me saying this was a problem. I ride my bike a lot in the summer, and not as much as you, Bronwyn. You get the award for that. But I can't think of a place in Ames that I've ever had trouble parking.
Oh, you want a list? I mean, I could get you a really long list.
Let's do it.
Of places where you need light poles and you need trees and then weather like this and you got a snow mound by the light pole and your lock doesn't reach around. I mean, it does exist.
This is a solution in search of a problem, in my opinion.
This is an incentive program.
But I don't want to. This is not good government. We don't come up with things to address speculative situations. I've never been approached. I reached out to the Bicycle Coalition for input on this. They said they don't have a position on this yet. I mean, maybe it can be presented to me later on, but I'm struggling to figure out why we're devoting resources to a situation that hasn't been identified as a problem.
Well, I would say this isn't a minimum parking standard I'm proposing. That, I think the Bike Coalition would want to think more about. And that's the part where we have, the 2 classes of parking that we might think about. And I agree with Kelly that that's something that would take a lot of thought, a lot of input. But my motion is just to allow a commercial or industrial development to swap out some of their car parking in exchange for bike parking, which I think is helpful to redeveloping smaller sites, and it allows them to put some permeable area where they could park bikes, and that wouldn't count towards the impervious area. I don't see the downside. It's just an incentive program. I mean, it's not meant to be a stick for anyone.
I think that we hear a lot that we may be over requiring parking for some businesses in town. And I don't know, Tim, I've heard from people, I'm not a biker, and I hear from people about problems they have with parking their bikes. I haven't heard from the Bicycle Coalition, but they do not represent every biker in Ames. So I think if we're going to be committed to complete streets and we want people to walk and bike and drive, do all those things, we need to provide the infrastructure some way. And this puts that as an incentive for businesses to provide the parking.
Yeah, I'm not going down the stick road in that, not a minimum standard at this point. I would like to keep that discussion open, but I think that is a much bigger discussion. But this, is just meant to help smaller sites that might want a little flexibility too in their impervious area.
Well, I think it probably would be impervious though, because you would want a secure platform for the racks. And I'm not sure it'd be pervious area just because it's a bicycle parking area.
Maybe. I mean, but I bet you could do it with
You do it with pavers or something
yeah,
very simple.
exactly. I mean, you could get creative and use that. I don't know. Anyway.
So I think we would say that the thought process behind this would be very much like why we have automobile parking spaces. We could just delete that and everybody just provides what they want. But the reason we have that in the first place is to have a set expectation that there will be some place for you almost always when you take your vehicle off of your property and go somewhere in the city. So the one time we did have a comment on this last year, the question was, I don't know that if I ride my bike somewhere, where am I ever going to park? Because we don't require it. Some places have parking, some don't. And is locking to a tree really the best answer, or to a light pole? So I think what we're trying to say is if we're going to be a biking community, it should be predictable that I can arrive at a destination with a reasonable expectation of a place to secure my bike. Now, going to the full length of the long-term parking versus short-term parking and requiring lockers in businesses and in apartments, that's a different conversation. But just that visitable element, that's a pretty basic trying to promote bicycle activity for day-to-day trips in a city. I think that's where we are as the planning department are suggesting it's a good thing to do now as an incentive, is to create that predictability of a destination.
Okay, anything else?
So this would just be to develop some proposed language for us to consider.
So we would, unless you want to revisit it, we would immediately go, since it's narrow in scope as the motion is, we would go to the Planning and Zoning Commission to say, here is an option for substitution. What is your recommendation? Then return to you to approve or deny the first reading of an ordinance.
So there's still be ample opportunity for community input.
Absolutely. So you're initiating us to start with the Planning and Zoning Commission, if this passes, on how to write such a substitution option.
It just still feels, I can support this next stage, but it just feels very speculative in nature.
Okay.
And I think we should be cautious about speculative types of things, so.
Okay, anything else?
No.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Callie. John, before you get into your presentation, if any, is this the same presentation that you went through on as part of the budget hearing and setting rates and stuff, or not? Or is there more information in it?
No, this is different than what we covered during the budget hearings.
That's the wrong answer, but that's okay. No. I guess while he's getting it warmed up, does council have any immediate questions for John that you can kind of highlight going through it? I think you did a very good job on the PowerPoint. It was very helpful to have that ahead of time. So thank you for, including that. And go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to move really quickly through this. We did try to give you a thorough evaluation, so I'm just going to hit just a handful of slides here to highlight a few points. The first thing is just the pattern of rate increases that we've seen in Ames over the last 4 years. A 2-year window there. We had been trying to alternate water and sewer every other year so that we didn't double them up. But there was a 2-year window there where we tried to leave room clear for electric when they were doing their natural gas conversion in case they needed to do something with rates so that we didn't double up. But over the most recent 4-year period, the average increase for water rates has been 1.9% per year. And in sewer, it was 2% per year. So to compare that, what's happening in the world around us, this is some data from the American Water Works. They actually do their survey every 2 years. And nationally, between 2012 and 2016, the most recent data, water rates nationally increased at a rate of about 5.9% per year. And that's compared to that last 4 years data that I showed you that we were at 1.9%. Sewer, a very similar story. Nationwide, not moving quite as fast as water, but very similar. And over that period of time, if you accept the CPI as an estimate of inflation, you can see that water and sewer rates are climbing at a rate faster than the rate of inflation. In fact, the National Association of Clean Water Agencies for 16 years in a row have noted that sewer rates are climbing at a pace faster nationally than inflation. If we look at statewide trends, this is from our own survey data that we do. And I've highlighted, well, what you see in those stacked columns every year that we do the survey, that's the dollar amount that a utility charges a customer for using 600 cubic feet of water in a month. And there's two data sets in there that I've pulled out in particular. The red dashed line is the statewide median. That means that half of the utilities in the state are charging more, half are charging less. The other data point is the green, and those are our rates that we've had in Ames. So you can see back in 2019, in 1999, 20 years ago, we were a little above the median. In this period between 2009 and 2013, when we were raising rates for the water plant, you can see we were just keeping pace with what the rest of the state was doing. And we are now at a point where our rates currently are about in the bottom third or so of our peers around the state. So the rate model that we use every year takes the past 6 years of operating budget data, the trend lines for each of the different elements in the budget, projects that forward to the next 10, and we insert our known capital projects for the next 10 years as well. And that's how we come up with this pattern of rate increases that we're recommending. So if you compare both the water and the sewer rate models, you can see that we're returning to that pattern of doing water 1 year, sewer the next, so that we can alternate and the two utilities don't compound on each other. I would remind for folks listening that the council, the ordinance tonight is only addressing year one. The rest of the information is just for planning purposes, so you can see which direction that we're headed. I really think that you have to look 10 years ahead on rates so that you can adjust things incrementally, gradually over time and not have sudden shocks to the system. So in the packet, we gave you a number of different sample customers to be able to evaluate the comparison. I want to highlight just one. This is our median residential customer. That's 600 cubic feet per month. That's right in the midpoint of what our customers are using. And remember that customers are billed for electric, stormwater, drinking water, and sewer all on the same utility bill. So the increase for this typical residential customer would be $1.73 per month. And on their total combined utility bill from the city, that would be a 1.28% increase in that total utility bill. So what we're recommending to you tonight is that you adopt on first reading an ordinance that would adjust those water rates by 7%, effective for bills mailed on and after July 1st. The timeline would have you, if you approve it tonight, the first reading, we would then do the second reading on March 26th, the final reading on April 9th, and that way the rates are in place and adopted and known by folks before they start using water at a rate that they're going to be billed at in the future. With that, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Dunn? All right, I will open up public comment from the audience before we go into our first reading of the ordinance. Is there anyone here that wants to address council on this topic? Seeing none, I will close public input and council discussion and or motion.
I would move on first reading.
Second.
All right, moving to second. Any discussion?
It's really impressive that we have maintained cost control the way we have. commend you and your team for the thoughtfulness in which you're approaching this. It's just a testimony to good government, so thank you.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Okay.
Anything else? All right, roll call.
Aye.
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 All right. Item 21, second passage of ordinance prohibiting parking at all times on the east side of North Riverside Drive and prohibiting parking at all times on the north side of Harris Street.
Move on
second.
Oh, second.
All right, moved and seconded. Discussion, roll call.
Aye.
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 All right, next item, disposition of communications to council. There are two items tonight. One is a memo from Don Com regarding initial utilization for the EV charging stations.
No actions required on
Yep.
that information.
It was very interesting.
Okay. Item 2, memo from John Dunn regarding referral regarding 728 East Lincoln Way.
No action required there. John said he's going to take the lead on that, accomplishing that. So he'll come back to you in the future with an easement.
So these are both information only.
Nope.
Okay. All right. Excuse me. Council comments.
John, what about the email that,
The email that came in regarding the sidewalks you're talking about on Mortensen. I have asked Tashik to put that on the 26th. It came in on Sunday, which did not follow within our Friday cutoff. So thanks for asking the question, Gloria. And if you would, council comments, Gloria.
I'm looking forward to attending the National League of Cities Congressional City Conference this weekend, and will be, I hope, learning some more about the census that we're going to be undertaking for 2020 and what we need to do for that. And I'm also looking forward to chairing the University Communities Council meeting. It looks like we may be working with the Iowa League of Cities and other municipal leagues around the country to help disseminate information on the race equity and leadership team plans for creating more inclusive communities. So I'm waiting to see what transpires with that. But it's kind of exciting that we may actually have an initiative to undertake that can help to maybe help other college communities and university communities in Iowa consider issues of inclusion and diversity. So that's it.
Okay. David?
Earlier today, I met with the mayor and city manager and Public Works and other staff members, and we were talking about development standards and tools for review of projects generally. And one of the things that came up is that it would be useful to have more tools to authorize the staff to do more on their own initiative without having to bring as much to council as they do. So I would ask staff for a memo on the possibility of council authorizing the traffic engineer to require traffic studies on his own initiative during project review, or along with any other appropriate project review tools that the staff would like us to consider.
Is there a second?
A second.
Just to augment that too, and from a customer service standpoint, it was staff's opinion, this would actually help the customer know up front when they're going through the DRC and the review process what's going to be expected. So it would potentially streamline, as well as not have some surprises and all of a sudden say, after the fact, hey, we want to have a traffic study on top of that, which might slow things down. And given the fact that we have outstanding staff that does a great job, in our opinion, really drilling down into empowerment and also help streamline the review process. And we looked at them anyway for that direction. So that's really kind of the motivation behind that. So
Yes, the intention is to make sure that they have the tools that are useful for their expertise in their profession.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, is the motion specifically for traffic and therefore something we get from Damien, or is the motion for all of Public Works and
It's
the
Damien.
processes?
Damien right now.
No.
right now,
Well, we'll look at other Well, you don't want to go into planning and all that, all those areas, right?
Well, I don't know. That's what I'm asking, because that sounded like what the motion, it started with Damien and then it went to other things, so.
All right, so I intended it to be targeted at public works, but I would, the staff has discretion to recommend whatever they want us to consider in the memo.
So it's not just Damien, it's anything to do with public works staff making recommendations?
Correct.
Okay.
At their discretion.
Mhm.
Okay. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Anything else, David?
No, thank you.
Tim?
Ames High plays in the state tournament tonight, 8 o'clock. Go Ames.
That's right. Right. Anything else? Chris?
Nothing tonight.
Robin?
Nothing for me.
Okay, I'll make up for you guys.
Oh.
One, I just want to commend the community and NAACP for an outstanding annual event last week. I think it was almost 500 people attended, and it was just great. And then I was invited to attend a conference called, or a presentation put on by Iowa State's iScore. It's something that I was not aware of at my own detriment. It stands for Iowa State Conference on Race and Ethnicity. Extremely impressive. I was only able to go for the first hour, but I think there's potential to try and see how we can work together with them to really, not directly with iScore, but maybe as a subset or something else on that. And so Gloria happened to be there too. And so she and I talking with Dr. Martino, Dr. Winterstein. And so I think we'll see where it goes, but I think it's just there to be commended too for undertaking that. And on the same race and ethnicity, I attend a Mid-Iowa local area government mayor's function every month. And we're getting more to come to Ames. And Dr. Stewart is going to present on race and ethnicity at that. So I'm looking forward to that. Last thing is, and I've been sending emails out to you, we are having an unbelievable barrage of things coming at us from the legislature. Next Thursday is going to be Ames Capitol, or Ames at the Hill. So I know for sure Steve and I are going down. If you're interested in going, let us know. You can caravan down. But it just seems almost unprecedented how many things are being thrown at us from different ways. And so it's going to be a tremendous amount of work, and we're seeking to work with other cities, and also the chamber has also expressed some interest in helping on some of this as well too. So stay tuned. Anyway, spring break coming up in 2 weeks. Our next meeting will not be until March 26th. So enjoy spring break. And with that, I need a motion to go into closed session.
Want this tonight?
Oh, gee, thanks.
Yeah, it's all yours.
I'm wondering, do we have reason that's legally permitted to go into closed session tonight?
Yes, we do. Iowa Code Section 21.5, subsection 1C allows the council to go into closed session to consider matters in litigation or threatened litigation.
I'd move that we go into closed session.
Second.
All right, roll call.
Aye.
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 Okay, once the chamber is clear, we will go into closed session. We are in closed session, but we'll commence.
They're not coming
Facility.
Okay, we are back in open session and would entertain a motion on the topic discussed.
I would move we approve the settlement as discussed. Is that all you need?
I couldn't.
Is that all you need, or do you need more specific
Contingent
language?
upon.
Contingent, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you when you said that. So
Oh, I see. I moved that we approve this settlement as discussed.
Do you want her to read the exact option?
Yeah, I
language?
could just read.
I've got it. Do you want me to
Option
read
You
it?
go ahead and do it. I withdraw.
I move we approve the settlement with Haley Shephers in the amount of $125,000 contingent upon obtaining a satisfactory signed release from Ms. Shepherd.
Second.
Okay. Discussion? All right. Roll call? Yes. Yep. Roll call, please.
Aye.
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 Okay. Thank you very much. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
All right, adjourned. Thank you.